They used to call us the diplomats of the galaxy. The humans, young, volatile in history but refined through pain, had become the voice of reason among elder species. We weren't the strongest or the most advanced, but we were something the others lacked: balance. We knew when to yield, when to push, when to extend a hand instead of a fist. For 2 centuries, that reputation held. We brokered peace in systems torn by generational blood feud. We forgave insults, repaired damage not of our making, and sent aid even to those who once fired on our colonies. But every boundary, even a moral one, has a breaking point. The Zeraxi Confederacy had been part of the Galactic Concord for 60 years. Arrogant, sharp-tongued, brilliant in genetics and brutal in diplomacy. They tested limits like it was a sport. They skirted rules, danced around treaties, and used proxies to do what they couldn't be caught doing. Everyone knew. No one acted. Why confront a hydra when it wears a suit and pays its dues? 3 years ago, human trade convoys began disappearing along the Helios corridor. The Zeraxi denied involvement. Investigations were inconclusive. We forgave. A border station near the Azure Drift was vaporized, 47 souls lost. A navigational accident, they said. We held a memorial, not a tribunal. We forgave again. We always did. There were whispers within our own systems. Discontent in the outer colonies. Senators urging the Terran Assembly to reconsider our deference. Still we stayed the course. Restraint over reaction. Dialogue over destruction. Not because we were afraid. Because we remembered Earth's long, blood-soaked history and swore never to repeat it among the stars. Then came Hestara 7. A research outpost. Civilian. Neutral. No weapons, no defenses. 112 personnel, mostly scientists, xenobotanists, and support staff. The transmission came at 0300 UTC. Static, then a single word. Burning. A second later, silence. By the time a patrol ship arrived, the colony was ash. No bodies. No survivors. No black box. Just melted soil and a thin layer of radioactive isotopes known to power Zeraxi plasma charges. The Concord demanded an explanation. The Zeraxi claimed it was natural stellar activity. A solar flare. False and easily proven. We presented data. Orbital scans. Energy signatures. Communications logs. The Council debated for 8 days. On the 9th, they issued a statement. Insufficient evidence for targeted aggression. Case closed. No sanctions. No accountability. Not even an apology. Something shifted. It wasn't in the words spoken in Earth's chambers, nor in the protests that followed. It was in the silence. The kind that grows in the chest when grief meets betrayal. We had lost more than lives. We had lost the illusion that patience always pays. A classified session of the Terran Strategic Council was convened. Generals, scientists, historians, ethicists. Not to plan war, but to ask the one question we had never dared to raise aloud. What happens if we stop forgiving? The answer came not as fire or fury, but as preparation. Earth didn't mobilize overnight. We didn't announce our intent. There were no speeches. But ships were reassigned. Patrols rerouted. Old projects were unarchived and funded in silence. On the outside we were the same. Courteous. Calm. Inside, something had calcified. The Concord saw none of it. To them, we were grieving. Perhaps we'd protest. Maybe boycott a vote. Nothing more. They believed in our predictability. That was their first mistake. Among the stars, alliances are built not just on shared interest, but on shared stories. And for too long, our story had been one of restraint. We had allowed ourselves to be defined by what we didn't do. But Hestara 7 wasn't just a loss. It was a message. One meant to test whether humans had the spine to hold the line. The Zeraxi had counted on our silence. The Concord had gambled on our restraint. They would regret both assumptions. Within months, small changes emerged. Human diplomacy grew colder. Requests for aid were delayed. Military parades resumed on Martian soil. New encryption protocols replaced Concorde's standard comms. Then came the withdrawal from the Concorde's Joint Fleet Initiative. A signal, but subtle. Not a break. A boundary. Whispers spread. Some thought Earth was turning inward. Others believed we were bluffing. But no one asked the question that mattered. Why would a species so committed to peace suddenly stop speaking? By the time they did, it was already too late. But in that first phase, after the ash of Hestara but before the storm, we were quiet. Not passive. Calculating. Every move measured. Every word weighed. Because we knew the moment would come when we would have to show the galaxy who we truly were, what centuries of peace had hidden. Not monsters. Not warmongers. But a people who remembered every broken promise. And we were still counting. The Concorde Summit began with ceremony, as always. Polished language, hollow promises, the performance of unity. Representatives from 47 species gathered in orbit above Delvra Prime. Officially, it was an emergency diplomatic session. Unofficially, it was a test, to see if humanity would accept what had happened at Hestara 7 as another unfortunate incident buried beneath bureaucracy. We arrived late. Not by accident but by intent. Ambassador Rintalvek led the Terran delegation. Stoic, methodical, chosen not for charm but precision. He brought with him the complete forensic archive from Hestara. Thermal decay patterns, orbital telemetry, particle residue, and a time-stamped energy signature that matched Zeraxi military-grade plasma lances. There was no ambiguity. No margin for alternate theory. Only proof. The evidence was projected, parsed, debated. Some representatives nodded in grim understanding. Others avoided eye contact. The Zeraxi delegation remained expressionless. Their speaker dismissed the data as manufactured bias, a desperate attempt by a grieving species to assign blame. They offered no counterproof, only disdain. Talvek didn't argue. He presented. He paused. He waited. And then he made the offer. One final chance. Not an ultimatum. A proposal. A pathway toward justice that avoided war. Reparations. Sanctions. A formal admission of responsibility. Not vengeance, accountability. The Concorde need only recognize the act for what it was and respond accordingly. Silence followed. Then came the vote. 19 species abstained. 12 voted to dismiss. 10 demanded further inquiry, delays disguised as diligence. Only 6 supported Earth's call for sanctions. The motion failed. The Zeraxi smiled. The rest looked away. Talvek closed his case with a single sentence. History will remember this moment, even if you won't. No threats. No demands. Just a promise. We returned to Earth without comment. News feeds spun theories. Some accused the Assembly of weakness. Others feared escalation. But inside the core councils, the decision had already been made. Not out of anger. Not for revenge. But because the system we helped build had shown its true face, corruption disguised as peace. 3 days later, Earth formally withdrew from the Concorde. Our ambassador seats were vacated. Shared research programs were terminated. Concorde military data relays were severed. The message was clear. We were done talking. The galaxy noticed. Trade routes rerouted around Terran space. Concorde patrols were instructed to avoid human ship. Species that once called us allies sent cautious messages, unsure how to respond. And the Zeraxi? They celebrated. They believed they had succeeded in breaking us, isolating us, proving once again that aggression paid, so long as it was politically protected. But they misunderstood what isolation meant to us. We had come into the stars alone. We'd fought extinction a dozen times before we ever left our atmosphere. Solitude was not our enemy, it was our origin. Within months, quiet shifts echoed across human infrastructure. Orbital shipyards accelerated production. Deep system listening posts were reactivated. Retired officers returned to classified briefings. Civilian corporations pivoted to military contract. Yet no formal declaration was made. Earth's government released only one statement: "We will not forget." Intelligence reports began to leak. Systems known for Concord neutrality were quietly granting Ziraxi fleets unchecked access. Former partners refused to acknowledge Earth's communications. The fabric of diplomatic engagement frayed, thread by thread. But the real change happened in the minds of those who had spent lifetimes building peace. Scholars who once advocated disarmament now published warnings about unchecked imperialism. Engineers who once worked on terraforming projects began designing stealth-capable destroyers. Cultural leaders, artists, poets, teachers, abandoned the language of reconciliation and turned instead to remembrance. Hestara 7 became more than a loss. It became a symbol, not of helplessness but of betrayal. And through it all, Earth said nothing more. Not because we lacked words, because we were done offering them. In the absence of our voice, others tried to speak for us. Concord media outlets described Earth as aggressive, dangerous, unpredictable. They said we were overreacting, that our grief had clouded our reason, that surely, with time, we would return to the table. But they misunderstood the silence. It was not the kind born of confusion or chaos. It was the silence of decision. A patient, deliberate quiet, the kind that comes just before impact. The final confirmation came when the Concorde attempted to send a diplomatic fleet toward Mars under the pretense of easing tensions. It was turned back before reaching the asteroid belt. Not with weapons, with code. A wall of synthetic interference scrambled their systems, rerouted their comms, and shut down propulsion in synchronized precision. They never saw the ships that did it. They were never meant to. The message had been received. Approach again, and you will not return. The Concorde officially declared diplomatic relations with Earth, suspended pending further review. Another fiction. Another attempt to preserve face. The truth was simpler. We had left them. Not in haste. Not in anger. In clarity. They had made their choice when they chose silence over justice. When they mistook our morality for submission. When they forgot that the ones who speak softly often carry the sharpest blade. And for the first time in generations, we sharpened ours. The strike wasn't announced. It didn't need to be. The Ziraxi Deep Space Depot in orbit around Varel 9 vanished in less than 12 seconds. Sensors picked up the rupture too late for any defensive response. No debris fields. No survivors. Just a distortion in space-time and a blackened scar on the orbital track. Officially, it was a gravitational event. Unofficially, every military strategist in the galaxy recognized the precision. No demands. No accusations. No broadcasted statement from Earth. Silence remained our language, and that terrified them more than any declaration. Over the next 6 weeks, 7 more facilities tied to the Ziraxi were dismantled in the same fashion. Outposts, communication hubs, hidden arms relays, all erased with clinical accuracy. No territory occupied, no prisoners taken, just void where there once had been asset. No patterns, no warning. Concorde security networks were bypassed like they didn't exist. The message was now unmistakable. If you harm us and hide behind procedure, you will be unmade. Internal Concorde panic set in. Emergency summits were called. The term, Terran Retaliation Doctrine, appeared in classified reports. Memos began circulating about Earth's possible technological advancement. Dark energy manipulation, silent drive fleets, black ice infiltration AI, none confirmed, all feared. For decades, humanity had shared openly. We had invited collaboration, offered blueprints, trained alien specialists in our academies. Now they realized how little they actually knew. The Concorde issued an official plea for de-escalation. They called on Earth to rejoin dialogue. They offered independent investigations, neutral tribunals, joint research on Hestara. Too late. The moment for justice had passed. What remained was consequence. Smaller powers began backing away from the Ziraxi. Border alliances quietly dissolved. Trade partnerships stalled. A few even reached out to Earth with guarded sympathies, hoping to avoid being next. We didn't respond. Not with words. We simply stopped erasing. That was response enough. Inside Zeraxi space, paranoia erupted. Civilian evacuation orders were issued from border colonies. Fleets repositioned defensively, though they never engaged. Not once. Because they understood what had changed. Earth wasn't waging war. We were rewriting rules. Not conquest. Not occupation. Just removal. It wasn't revenge. It was warning. The Concord tried to intervene again, this time sending a fleet to protect stability in shared systems. The fleet never arrived. Navigation systems rerouted them into deep space anomalies. When they returned, their logs were corrupted, their captains shaken, their pride shattered. Still, not a single Terran ship had been seen. The fear wasn't in what we did, it was in what we didn't show. Back home, humanity remained steady. No celebrations. No broadcasts of power. Production increased, but not in the open. What was built stayed hidden. What was deployed left no trace. Across colonies and orbitals, our people focused not on war, but on permanence. If the galaxy would not protect us, then we would become something it could never threaten again. Among Concord scholars, theories spread like wildfire. Some claimed Earth had unlocked precursors technology. Others argued we'd formed secret alliances with extragalactic entities. But the truth was simpler. We had spent centuries pursuing peace. And in that pursuit we had mastered not just diplomacy, but preparation. Every treaty, every cultural exchange, every research partnership had taught us more than they realized. And while others dismissed humanity as naive, we had studied everything, including how to disappear. Eventually, the Zeraxi sued for truce. Not through Concord channels, but directly. Encrypted transmissions delivered via third-party relays. They denied involvement in Hestara. They blamed rogue admirals, insurgent cells, experimental weapons platforms gone wrong. They offered reparations. We ignored them. Another relay. This time an offer to turn over internal data, ship logs, military codes. No reply. The final transmission was simple. What do you want? No answer came. They would never understand that it was never about wanting. It was about ending the pattern. The era where violence could hide behind treaties, where consequences could be dodged through delay, where forgiveness was treated as weakness. That era was over. The last known Zeraxi military command hub vanished 2 weeks later. No reports. No press. Just silence. And then it stopped. No more disappearances. No more anomalies. Earth returned to its previous pattern of communication. Limited, professional, cold. Trade resumed with select species. Research collaboration with trusted partners slowly reopened. The Terran Assembly issued a new diplomatic charter. Not aggressive. Not imperial. Just firm. Zero tolerance for unprovoked aggression. Immediate consequence for systemic negligence. No negotiations under duress. All agreements contingent on verified accountability. A doctrine not of dominance, but of clarity. Some species welcomed it. Others resented it. But all understood it. Within a generation, the Concord transformed. Not by our hand, but by theirs. Seeing what humanity had become forced change. Internal reforms passed that had failed for centuries. Oversight strengthened. Diplomacy gained weight. War lost its convenience. And Earth? We returned to what we always wanted, peace with teeth. Not because we had craved destruction, but because we had finally made clear what patience protected. Not because we needed war, but because the galaxy needed to learn what peace actually costs. We do not forgive blindly anymore. Not because we are lesser for it, but because we are wiser. We do not forget. And we never wait again for permission to be protected.